Welcome to our 8th recording in 18IT 475 mobile programming. I have up the Scrum board, and we left off with making the save button functional, creating an activity, and defining an XML layout. We're going to continue with that today, and we're also going to create interfaces and create the stub implementations. So I am going to, well, with any luck, there we go. I'm going to drag these two items over into our in progress box. We could say we have created an activity. We have more modifications to go, but we have at least created one. We've started one. So in theory, we could move that to verify. And in practice, what we would have happen now is we would have a tester verify this and move it to done. So we'll go ahead and move that to done for the experience. So what we're going to do is create our stub implementation and create our interfaces. We're also going to start using advanced view components, so I'm going to move that to in progress as well. So these are the three things that we're going to work on today: creating interfaces, the stub implementation, using advanced view components, we'll go ahead and move the save button functional over to done. We did start that. We might have some more things to do there though. Define XML layouts. We're going to continue to enhance our XML layouts as we work with our advanced view components and our additional layouts and so on and so forth. The presentations that we're going to view today are on Blackboard under course documents. We're going to look at views, which we started with last week. We'll continue with that discussion. And we're going to also look at advanced view components. One moment as I resize these and get them into our window. Advanced view components. We'll focus a lot on this one. We're also going to look at layouts. As a matter of fact, here's a screen capture of a nested layout that we're going to look at. This is the plant search screen, and this is part of what we're going to work on today. What we're going to see here is a lot of information on one screen. A genus, species, common name, and then a category which can be a drop-down. Okay, so a drop-down has a list of predefined choices. Then maybe some radio buttons that say recommended, native, edible, common name, Latin name, and then down below a search button. So this is where we will enter our search criteria. Now, one thing that's very important when considering the Android application is, first of all, the limitations of a small screen. Secondly, consider where the application tends to be used. Where do you use your mobile phone? Think about that for a few seconds. Okay, we all just had the same thought, and let's not discuss that. But needless to say, you know where you use your mobile phone. And many times you want to get away with as little typing as you possibly can. So we have to keep that in mind, that we don't want to type a lot. So one of the things we're going to try to take advantage of is an autocomplete text field. And that is where you start typing and it automatically completes based on what the answers are, what the possible entries would be for that box. So in other words, many times when we're collecting data from the user, there might be a limited set of choices that the user can enter in. A category, for instance, is a drop-down box that will say things like tree, shrub, perennial, annual, grass, so on and so forth. That's a concise list of about 7 items total. Perfect for a drop-down box, or as we call it in Android vernacular, a spinner. On the other hand, a genus, well, how many genuses are there? There are quite a few. Maybe too many to conveniently scroll through a drop-down box. So what we might want to do is we might want to give the user an opportunity to start typing, and as the user types, it filters down the number of genuses that match that criteria that the user is typing in, and it auto-completes for the user, thus saving the user keystrokes. Of course, the keyboard on an Android device is, it is small, right? And it's not something where we can typically get in a lot of words per minute. So we want to make it as efficient as possible and reduce the number of keystrokes needed whenever possible. So these advanced UI widgets are going to help us. Now, think to yourself, if we have autocomplete text, or if we have a spinner, we're going to need a source of data somewhere that's going to feed this autocomplete text. And honestly, if I look at the real plant places, I dearly wish that I had autocomplete text on here on the actual website, because when you have something like search plants by name, there are a lot of genuses out there. It's very easy to misspell. Unfortunately, this is a low budget, low technology website written in Perl, which is before we had the concept of autocomplete text. So it's doable, but it would take a lot of effort. Luckily, on the Android device, support for autocomplete is already built in, and it's quite easy to do. So that's one of the things we're going to look at. But we do need to consider, what will the source of data be? Well, we only want to give the user valid search criteria. We only want to give the user autocomplete where we actually have plant records. In other words, if we're dealing with plant places in Cincinnati, we don't care as much about plants that only survive near the equator. That might not be something that's very interesting. We also wouldn't be interested in plants that are almost extinct that we wouldn't find in the landscape. So the best source of data for our autocomplete text is going to be from the Plant Places database or the Plant Places website itself. And so what we need to think about doing is making an interface for plant service that will provide this data. And remember, the beauty of an interface is that a variable can be an interface type. In other words, when we make a variable, we need a name to keep it unique from other variables, and a type, a name and a type. The type of a variable can be an interface type, and then we'll marry it up to an object of a class that implements that interface when we do the initialization of that variable. Okay, so given that, what we can do, just like your group project, just like what I recommended for your group project, is we can build an interface. Not a user interface, but an interface as a data type. Give it methods like get all genuses, get all categories, so on and so forth, or even get species for genuses. We can give it a method like that, and then build a stub implementation. That would be the job of our persistence person. The persistence person then gives this interface with a stub to the UI person. The UI person uses that interface and stub to build the UI. While the UI person is building the UI, the persistence person is working on the actual implementation of that with SQLite. So that's what we're going to simulate here, except I'm just going to play both roles. But in theory, I could be two different people very easily. Now, search for a plant. This screen could be used in many places. It could be used by a consumer on the mobile device who maybe is at a garden center saying, gosh, I'm looking for something, a recommended native and edible. Let's see what we have. Oh, do you have this in stock? Something like that. Or it could be used by us as administrators. So the application that we have so far looks like this. We want to associate latitude and longitude with existing plants. Okay, once again, if I bring up the live plant places, I go to map of plants, and then I click on internal maps, and what we'll see here are GPS locations that are associated with plants, with genuses and species. Now, it's what we see here at the zoo. I got in a total of 3 visits to the zoo. Each visit was a little less than 2 hours. I figured out my velocity is about 75 plants per 2 hours. And part of the reason for that is that I can grab the GPS location and then immediately associate it with a plant and upload it to plantplaces.com. We want to stay away from manual work. We don't want to just record GPS location and then a few notes that later on we're going to go marry up with the plant places database. Instead, what we want to do is say the phone automatically gets the GPS on a regular interval. I have mine set to 1 minute, but it's configurable. I could make it 30 seconds or 5 minutes or whatever is a nice balance between accuracy and battery life. And then I want to be able to search on existing plants that exist within the Plant Places database, and then match these two up and then say save and upload. And when I upload, I want it to go directly to plantplaces.com. Here's an example of one. I'll go ahead, hopefully this one will work for me. I was out at dinner tonight, Lavender. You probably have seen this plant out in your landscape, out in landscape. Well, shoot, there are no pictures of it, wouldn't you know? In any case, this is what we call lavender. And lavender is a fairly common plant. I can't believe I'm actually going to somebody else's. Well, let's see. Maybe I can find it here. Let me look under the other lavender. Because I know we had a special... Damn, no pictures there either. Okay, fine. Lavandula angustifol. I'm very surprised that we don't have any pictures of this in the Plant Places database. So this is lavender. It's something frequently used in landscaping around here. You see, it kind of has a very unique scent to it. Anyway, I was out at dinner tonight, and I found some lavender up where I was eating, which is up off Field Turtle Road. What I'm going to do now, I'm going to grab my phone, and you know what? Let me see if I can... Does Screencast-O-Matic give me any capability to do webcam? It's embarrassing because I'm in jeans and a t-shirt right now, not my usual suit and tie. Maybe I better not do that. Hang on one second. I'm going to pause and see if I can webcam. Well, I didn't find a webcam capability. Maybe that's a good thing, though. What I'm doing right now is I'm going on my actual Android phone, and I'm going to choose Upload Locations, and if all works well, I'm going to watch this. This is from the GPS location that I grabbed just today while I was out at dinner. If all works well, what I can do now, and I just got a response from my phone that it did upload, I'm going to go ahead and just hit the refresh button on this page. That's off screen, but trust me, I'm hitting the refresh button. And what we should see is that GPS should now be associated with this plant. And sure enough, here we go. It looks like I put the wrong side on, and I put the zoo, and I meant to put a generic this location captured by GPS device, but I can change that very easily. Needless to say, if we take a look at this, here we go. That's about where I had dinner tonight, and let's see how much it's going to let me zoom up. Yep, okay, actually, yep, you know, the GPS is smarter than I am. It was on Mason Montgomery Road. That's exactly where I was, at Mimi's Cafe. If you're familiar with this area, there's the Walmart here. And then this is Mimi's Cafe. If I can get this guy to move, I can do a satellite view and you can see it. But so anyway, I grabbed that with my phone, and what I did from my phone is I took this GPS locator screen, and there's a button on there where I can search the active Plant Places database for a genus and species combination. So while I was there, I quickly searched for Lavandula angustifolia, which is the Latin name for lavender, and I was able to associate it with this latitude and longitude, and then I was able to marry those two together. And just now, when I hit pause, I went ahead and uploaded the location live here from my home, and we see it married up quickly. So we want to give the user the ability to associate GPS with a genus and species while out in the field. And that's what this screen is going to do for us. We're going to need to call it from our initial Plant Places mobile location finder. So while I look at this, probably what I need to do is go back and add a few things to that Scrum board. I might see, let's see, create specimen entry screen. Really, I need to add a new story. I need to add a story. Let's see, do I have anything? Oh no, here we go. Yeah, there we go, actually. Create Plant Places service interface. This will work. Add capability to attach plants to specimens. Create online lookup. I'm assuming okay, that might be okay, that's the actual implementation. I also will need here a new task to create a plant search screen. Okay, and we'll assign that to me. Um, we'll give that a complexity on one of the Fibonacci numbers, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21. We'll give that a 3. Plant search screen. And then I'll do another plus, and we'll say create a results screen. That's tricky because we're actually going to need to go, yeah, we'll just leave it generic. We'll leave it generic. We'll give that a 3 and assign it to me as well. Okay, lots of things to do then. Lots of things to do, so we better get busy with it then. So I'm going to take a look first. Well, let's see. What do I want to do first? First, I'm going to what I really want to do is I want to amend my existing screen to be able to call this other screen. I want to do things I know I can test. I also need to build my interface as well. Let's do it in this order. Let me add a button to my existing location finder screen that's going to render then the plant search screen. From the plant search screen, we're going to need the interface and the stub classes, okay, that will feed us a list of genuses and a list of species. So we can do both the autocomplete text and also the spinner. I'll go ahead and close this debugger window now. And I'm going to go into Eclipse, and once again this will be just a little bit tricky because I have to fit it onto our screencast-o-matic screen capture here. Okay, that looks good. And I'm going to go into Location. Okay, and we'll have a little review here as we explore what a button is. And if I take a look at this, I have a table layout. So I have latitude and longitude in row 1 and 2, description in row 3, the save location button in row 4. I'm going to see if I can drag and move that to row 5, and there we go. So right now I see nothing in row 4. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to the form widgets, and I'm going to see if it will let me add a button here, and there we go. That'll work out quite well. So I'm going to add a button to row 4. I'm going to right click and choose Edit ID, and we'll call this btn find plant. Or we could say find specimen. Really, we're trying to either create a new specimen or associate GPS with an existing. I'll go ahead and say find specimen. So a specimen is a plant that we can touch. Okay, we know that we're going to need to change the text as well, so I'll say new string. And I'll say, let's see, I'll try to bring this down to put it in our window. We need to give the string a name, so we'll say LBL find specimen, so label for the find specimen button. The string will be what actually appears on that button, and we'll say find specimen. And again, the idea, I cannot spell today. The idea is that we can hit this button and search for plants on the Live Plant Places database. After this, I choose OK. Okay, let it think for a second. Delicious. Okay, choose OK, and there we go. Now, next to find specimen, I'm going to put a text view, which in other words is a label. Okay, so a label, a text view, is something that will be basically a read-only view. And this is where we're going to place the name of the specimen that was found. So I'm going to right-click and choose Edit ID and say TXT. We'll say specimen label. That's kind of redundant. We'll just say TXT found specimen. We're not going to need this right away anyway. I just want to put a marker here. Okay, we don't need any text there yet, so let's see if I can right-click and say Edit Text, and we'll set it to blank as we had before. So it's just a blank label that's sitting there waiting for information. After all of this, I choose Save. Now, remember that our layout is XML based, and if I scroll up here and click on Location, we're going to see that this is indeed a legitimate XML-based file. Well-formed XML might have an informational tag at the top, but beyond that, it's going to have one root element, as we call it, a root element. A root element is an open and close tag, and it's the very first and very last thing in a well-formed XML file. So we see that we're opening the layout here with our table layout, and then we're closing it on line 25, and everything in between is a child, grandchild, or some other ancestor of table layout. So there we go. So the layout we know is XML based. Now I've added this Find Specimen button, and we need some way to get access to this on our activity called Location Finder. Because once we have access to it on our activity, we can actually assign a listener to it and have it do things. In this case, the thing it's going to do is it's going to render our plant search screen. Okay, now remember how we get access to something from the XML layout. What we do, I'm going to try and maximize our space here so we can fit as much as we can. What we do is anytime something is added to XML, Android does something very nice for us, and it updates this file called r.java with a constant number that we can use to easily refer to that component. And we can refer to it with the variable that constant number is assigned to. The truth is, we don't care what number it is. We care about the variable that Android gives it. And so in this case, let's see. We have our strings here. We have BT and Find Specimen. This is the number, but again, we don't care. We just care to refer to it by its variable name. Using that variable name then, our activity can get access to elements that are on that XML layout. That sounds really complicated, but I promise it's not. What we need to do to get access to that button is invoke the superclass method, findViewById, and then we need to pass to that ID the number from r.java. The number from r.java that represents that button we just added to the layout, the Find Specimen button. What button is that? What's the name of the variable? Well, it just follows the syntax. The file R, then ID, and then we just start typing the name of the button, btn Find Specimen. Boom, that's all we need to do. That's all we need to do. Given this will return a reference to that button. But what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to cast this because it's going to return a view, which is the superclass of all UI widgets. That doesn't have a whole lot of functionality with it. A button, on the other hand, has things like an onclicklistener. And the onclicklistener is what we want to have happen when the button is clicked. So find view by ID will return a view. We need to cast that to a subclass of view called button. So I put the cast here, button. There we go. And it doesn't know what I'm doing here. Button cannot be resolved to a variable. It doesn't know what I'm doing. I'll tell you what we can do. Let me see if I can have Eclipse do something for us. Okay, I'm going to say assign state. I'm sorry, I held down Control and pressed 1, and I'm going to say assign statement to new field. Remember, local variable means it's only usable within this method. Field means it's defined at the class level and usable as an attribute, so it's usable in other methods too. I'm going to say assign to new field, okay, and it gives me kind of a default name, find view by ID. I'm going to call it btn Find Specimen. There we go. The other thing it does is it declares it up above of type view. I'm going to change it to button. The problem is, as soon as I change this variable type from view to button, it sees a problem. This is returning the superclass view. This is a variable of the subclass button type. So we need to cast from view to button. To cast, we simply put the type we're casting to the left of the object we're casting from. In other words, we just put button in parentheses here. And there we go. We're all set. At this point, I choose Save. Now that we have the button, we can add an on-click listener. And if you remember from our last lecture, there are 3 ways to do that. One way is with an inner class. That is, well, one way is with a class, another way is with an inner class, and a final way is this goofy syntax, which is an anonymous inner class. This is the most common, though it is confusing. What we have here is the onclicklistener method of a button must accept a class which implements the onclicklistener interface. What we can do is we can just quickly make a class that implements the onclicklistener interface, and we don't have to give that class a name. We simply say new onclicklistener and then open curly and then match and close curly. Inside of that, we put the one method that onclicklistener defines, which is onclick. Within onclick, we invoke a method called save, which is a method within this outer class. Okay. What makes this especially confusing is that we have a method call. Within that, we have a definition of a class that we're defining and instantiating all at once. Within that, we have a method, and within that, we're calling another method. So there's a lot of recursion going on here, but this is a fairly common thing to do to save some typing. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say btn find specimen and then set on click listener. Okay. And easiest thing to do now is terminate that with a semicolon and break to a new line, because we're going to have lots of lines here. Now, within the open and close paren, I say new on click listener, open and close paren again, open curly, we automatically get a close curly. I'm going to cursor over here and bring this flush. Okay, now we let Eclipse do some work. I get a red line on click listener, and what it's saying is it knows I have an anonymous inner class, but it's a bit mad at me because I have not implemented the method that the interface onclicklistener specifies. So I simply choose add unimplemented methods. Voila, there we go, there's our onclick. From here, I can have this onclick invoke a method, let's say find specimen. That's a method that I haven't created yet, so I'm going to need to create that. Okay, and it's no surprise I'm getting a red line there because I haven't created that yet. I am a bit confused why btn find specimen is giving me a red line until now. Now I realize I simply misspelled it. Specimen. There we go. And now all is well, and all that's missing is this find specimen method. Now we know whenever we get a red line, the first thing we want to do is fix that red line. So this gets really confusing because we have open and close paren semicolon, close curly, note the matching open curly, close curly, close paren, which looks a lot like a close curly, but indeed we're matching with this open curly here. And then close curly here, and that close curly is for the method on create. So we have to be very careful where we are. I really stress, we really have to count our curlies when we do this. If you're uncomfortable with this, consider making your listener a separate class. That's perfectly fine. It's a little more typing, but it's a little more clear as well. So what we want to do now is implement the find specimen method. So I'll say private void find specimen, open and close paren, open curly, close curly, and at this point I've satisfied my red line. So let me review again. When the button find specimen is clicked, it's going to go to this method onClick. Because of the goofiness of an anonymous inner class, we don't want to put too much logic in here. We really want to keep this very light. So the best thing we can do is delegate to another method, and in this case that other method is called findSpecimen. We come down here and there's our findSpecimen. Okay, and I'll put a bit of JavaDoc over this that says find specimens, let's say find plants from which we can create specimens. Something like that. That's good. And this, and I might even say, we'll say another line, this will redirect us to the plant search screen. Okay, and there we go. And then the next thing to do is going to be to create that plant search screen and navigate to it.